right. Happy Tuesday, everybody. I am Nick Kaplan from RMW Commerce. In the other seat today, pleased to be here with the man himself, Rick Watson. Hello, Rick.
Glad to be here, Nick. Excited to talk about earnings.
It's your favorite topic, earnings season.
Yeah.
We had a big one today, Shopify earnings.
Shopify Q3 2024 earnings, and the market seemed to like it, which we're not necessarily market watchers here. We're more here to get the story behind the story on Shopify earnings. And so I'm excited about some of the questions we have lined up for from you today.
Yeah, I'm excited to be sitting here on the opposite side interviewing you. I know you are a deep you are deep in the Shopify space and an industry expert, a partner of Shopify, RMW Commerce is, and there were some incredible earnings today. And so let's jump right into that. So, I mean, based on what we saw today, I mean, give us a quick intro on what you felt seeing Shopify's earnings, market aside.
Yeah, so the high level is like the biggest top line number was that their operating income doubled year over year, which is kind of a mic drop moment, which doesn't happen very often. I think Amazon has been putting up similar results in like operating income and free cash flow due to their logistics improvement, but Shopify has been doing kind of similar work. The story is GMV growing mid-20s, between 24 and 26%, revenue growing in a similar vein, and operating expenses only growing 7% year over year. And so they're increasing things like sales and marketing costs by between 6 and 10%, and they're still growing faster than 25%. Those are good numbers that any company would love to hear.
So I think the question on everybody's mind then is going to be, and I'll start off with this one, is, I mean, how sustainable is Shopify's current trajectory? In the call, they talked about 6 consecutive quarters of 25% growth and many others to sort of bolster their argument for dominance. And not lost on me is your Amazon comment, putting them in the same company almost. But talk about next. I mean, what does it look like? Is it sustainable?
Yeah, look, it seems to me that there is a durable trend here that Shopify is taking advantage of. Not only is commerce continuing to grow fast and under penetrated versus all of retail. I mean, depending on the category, you have penetration of 10% to 50% and higher. Especially in the categories that have been around in e-com for a long time. You also have old line commerce platforms that aren't performing well, like going back several years ago to sort of, the Oracles and the SAPs that have kind of killed old platforms. And, after 5 to 10 years, companies need to migrate. And so you also have like several thousand merchants on Salesforce that are paying multiple millions a year for an e-commerce platform. Shopify has as a tailwind of being a value-oriented platform. What does that mean? They came from the SMB entrepreneur space, which is like a platform costs, $30 a month, $50 a month, plus payment processing and, a few, fractions of a percentage point. Even as Shopify continues to increase their pricing, they're coming from such a low base relative to people who started at the top and go up from there. Like, it's not like you come from the top, like Salesforce has come from the top and like lowered their prices over time. I think there was a narrow window they did that 4 years ago when Salesforce Commerce Cloud did come down market. But all of those things are tailwinds, I think, to Shopify. And the risks are what you saw during COVID was that merchant solutions, which is the percentage of their revenue, which is based on payment processing, really outpaced subscription revenue. And I think you see those coming more in line. And so that's kind of the story now, where subscription revenue is just the number of new merchants joining the platform is setting the pace of their revenue growth.
so much in there to talk about. I think people lose sight of the price increases that Shopify made not so long ago. So talk about that. I mean, how much was that in there, and how much will they have to defend that going forward?
Yeah, I mean, look, Shopify they have so much R&D that goes into the platform, billions and billions. I think the number in my head is like $17 billion in R&D,
Wow.
R&D they do. That's just off the top of my head. It could be slightly different. It's still increasing. It's not increasing as much as the rest of their spending, and so they're just releasing just so many features across so many avenues so quickly. And the last time they don't raise prices, but every 4 or 5 years.
Right.
So I think they have room to run. I think Shopify, because it's founder led, it's continued to be a value oriented ecosystem. I don't believe the Shopify management team wakes up every morning and said, like, how can we squeeze an extra few basis points out of our merchants? They think more like, how can we attract more of the top merchants because our product is the best? And if we're going to get more money from merchants, like, let's add new products and services like Shopify Finance or B2B or POS. I think they think more horizontally than like every year raising the price.
Got it. Agree. And I think that sort of opens up another question, which is, you talk about Shopify as an SMB, you talk about its movement up, and I think Salesforce's movement down. I've always thought it's easier to go up market than it is to go down market. Although it's both ways is filled with peril. But I mean, can we actually call Shopify now? Are you going to go on the record and say Shopify is an enterprise solution? I have a follow-up for you.
Yeah, I think I'm not quite ready to go there yet. I think Shopify, as it stands today, is an upper mid-market solution. And I think they are in all the conversations that will put them on the map in the enterprise solution. I think they recently had a kerfuffle with Gartner where they're like on the line of the Magic Quadrant, and I suspect some of this is the reason. Like, yeah, they're making progress, but they haven't arrived yet. Look, the good news for Shopify is all the arrows are pointing up and to the right for them. So, their biggest POS installation, they just announced on the call 150 stores. That's not exactly enterprise scale.
Right. Enterprise scale of yesterday. It might be enterprise of tomorrow, but I mean, if you're
I didn't know we were going to get Kaplan's prediction on the retail industry on this call.
I mean, you're always going to get Kaplan's prediction, but this is about Watson, not Kaplan. So Watson pretend to be Shopify. I mean, I've asked you your opinion. How do you feel Shopify feels about itself and how Gartner painted it?
Yeah, I think Shopify feels really good about itself. I think Shopify feels likely very slighted by Gartner because, look, if you're a Shopify management, you think Shopify is commerce, and for Shopify not to be in the middle of the Magic Quadrant as opposed to like off to the line, maybe like squeaked in by a hair. That's not how they think about themselves. So it probably wasn't a fun day when they saw that come out.
Right. Interesting. So then how do you feel? I mean, B2B was a conversation they were having on the call. You and I, gosh, about 15 months ago, were able to see some of it demoed. Appears it's come a long way, but is it a B2B solution?
I think it is a B2B solution. I think it's still pretty nascent to be in the kind of industrial configure, price quote, configurator, extremely complex product catalogs. Although I think they've made a lot of progress there. It's not necessarily with like the details about the product catalog that are now the issue. It's more about like how the different parts of a product catalog play together. As someone navigates a product that is suited for them, you still need external solutions, probably a PIM or something like that, powering the front end of a UI or some kind of enterprise class search engine. So I think B2B, they're making progress. I think BigCommerce has historically had a 3 to 4 year head start on Shopify in this space because they made some strategic acquisitions, like at the beginning of COVID, Bundle B2B, etc. Shopify has, I think, caught up to the fact that there's this native B2B market, in particular industrial, scientific, manufacturing, distributor category that no one thinks about Shopify for. And I think they announced on this call, really for the first time, like last quarter, they talked about carrier, and like for the last year, they were like carrier. That was their one example. And like Shopify is very fond of like saying, we're in this category. Here's one name, right? And that's like how Shopify enters a category. It doesn't mean that's where they stay, because they've indicated they have signed a few more this quarter, but that's kind of where they are. It's not like they have dozens of examples in this category, in my mind, right now.
Got it. Interesting. And I think wait and see on both enterprise and B2B. But to your point, it was good to see them making significant progress in both. So another, I mean, in a very Kaplan kind of way, another pointed question. So, I mean, when is a payments company not a payments company, right? Question mark, question mark, question mark. Is it still a payments company?
It's a good question. I think, look, Shopify has been kind of like the payments company that's not a payments company for a long time, because they don't own their own payment rails. It's all provided by Stripe, or in different markets, other providers, especially Europe, etc. And outside of there, they've signed some deals with PayPal in other markets too, and in the US. So I think that is a question that if I'm Shopify, although you own a nice chunk of Stripe, how much do you want to bring in-house here? And there's always going to be friction, particularly at the enterprise level, if your payment processor doesn't match the chosen payment processor of your platform. The conversations are complicated, and more complicated than they would be if Shopify didn't have a winner. It's questionable to understand, would Shopify still be Shopify if they did it another way, if they were agnostic to payment processor? That's I think a more challenging question to answer.
Fair. So you mentioned PayPal. You've written a bunch about PayPal and Shopify. So it came up. They talked a bit about it. We talk a little bit about what that means for the future of both companies, really, but like frenemies sort of seems to ring here, but I'd love to hear you talk about it.
Yeah, I think frenemies is the best way to understand Shopify and PayPal. Both need each other. Both need to partner. I think both sides realize that. Both cannot partner too much. And the reason is because Shopify is a huge part owner of Stripe, and PayPal wants to be the default payment processor everywhere, and Shopify will never allow that. So that's kind of, there's partnership up to a point, and then the partnership sort of hits a hard ceiling of the things that the companies can do together. I don't think Shopify necessarily cares that PayPal is another button on the checkout any more than they care that Venmo or anyone else's Amazon Pay is on the checkout. Like, if the merchant wants it, Shopify wants to have it there. I truly believe that. But do I think that if PayPal could have invested in Shopify 4 years ago, do I think they regretted not doing that? Probably. Yeah.
Got it.
Maybe a little older than 4 years ago, maybe more like 10 years ago.
Got it. So changing gears, we talked a bit about the team, and you talked about Shopify team waking up each day, and Shopify made a pretty significant hire, and Mikhail Parakin made his way into the call, and there was some talk around not just his arrival, but kind of what it symbolized, right? So talk a little bit about your take on the reference to him and some of the initiatives around Roblox and YouTube and TikTok, and I think what it means.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, the reality is I don't think that the new CTO has anything to do with any of those things you mentioned, because I think Shopify would have done most of those things anyway. I really think the hiring of the former, head of Microsoft Copilot and one of the leaders at Yandex, essentially the Russian version of Google, it's about the next generation of search, discovery, and AI. And I think Shopify views AI in a way, the same way that Amazon does, and that this is sort of like a once in a lifetime opportunity over the next 5 to 10 years to really change the trajectory of SaaS, merchant experience and customer experience. And we're just not going to build custom companies the same way 10 years from now than we did 10 years ago. I believe that Shopify saw that they needed to up level their, I would say, AI chops. Not that they weren't anywhere, but it's an area where it's hard to overinvest from the point of view of Shopify, particularly when you have a technologist running the company like Toby, and who's like
Right.
so involved in the weeds there.
Right.
Toby is essentially an enterprise architect running Shopify. And so he is sort of putting the pieces together and the players on the field and letting them run. And they're just like the venture capital industry is running with open arms towards AI. Shopify is not going to be left behind that trend. So I don't think you'll see the outcome of the new CTO really truly for the next 2 or 3 years.
Interesting. They did talk about AI, and we talk a lot about the age of efficiency, and I think it was woven throughout this call about problems Shopify is solving more. I feel like in the SMB and mid-market, I don't know that the solutions that they're touting are as enterprise important today. But I mean, talk about that. Talk about AI. Talk about how Shopify spoke to it and things they need to do to continue to close that gap.
Look, I think Shopify is in very early innings with their AI rollout. They talked about some big things like a sidekick. Ultimately, I think those things don't matter too much because in the end of the day, a sidekick is going to be a glorified help, a better search engine for your help file, right? Who cares? Right. And so I think the things that Shopify has done are auto-generating titles, descriptions, updating imagery, removing backgrounds. Shopify Inbox got a lot of play on the call, generating responses to emails, which is similar to what you can do in like a Gmail, right? So it's not like, who cares was my answer to this question. I think there are some entrepreneurs in the audience who are like, oh yeah, this is super helpful because I use Shopify Inbox.
Right.
What percentage of Shopify customers on Plus use Shopify Inbox? Like, very few. I think most of them probably use Gorgeous or Zendesk or Salesforce Service Cloud. So they're going to see that Shopify Inbox is kind of a nothing burger from that point of view. And so I really believe Shopify, frankly, does need to up its game in AI, even though it's said it's important. And I'm sure it is important in terms of a lot of the internal efficiency. The merchants are still not seeing, I would say, breakthrough AI improvements. We're still kind of in the incremental phase.
Got it. I loved your use of the word nascent. True. But interestingly enough, talking about some of the things, a lot of the things really that Shopify said it's going to do in the roadmap, as large and grand as it is, there were some things Shopify talked about it's not going to do, and they were pretty declarative. And I felt early on, it seemed like they were leaning towards the ERP place. What about ERP, CRM? I mean, things they talked about not doing. Is that good that they stay focused? What does it all mean?
Yeah, I think there was a question on the call, particularly for enterprise clients, where Shopify was asked if they were going to build an ERP system, which is an enterprise resource planning system, or a CRM system or customer relationship management system like Salesforce started as. I think Shopify believes that they have a different approach to innovation. They don't feel like they need to build all the things. And in particular, they own parts of, they own part of Klaviyo, they own part of Stripe, I think my suspicion is Shopify views at the high end, no one ever freaking replaces Oracle ERP. No one ever replaces SAP ERP. It's just not done. And so it's a waste of time to Shopify to even think about that.
Got it.
What's much more useful to Shopify to think about is, if you're a new merchant starting today, why would you ever need an ERP? And so I think Shopify probably believes, and I think they've made some acquisitions on inventory management to improve like things like EDI integration and lot counting and a lot of things that people need ERPs, inventory costing. And I think they'll add more accounting features into Shopify with this new Shopify finance module. Like that will get better. All those things are reasons why, like, I mean, it used to, once you get to $10 million, like back in the day, I used to have a lot of customers start to think about NetSuite. Like, oh, we need an ERP because we're a real business now. We've outgrown QuickBooks. Frankly, I kind of worry that the QuickBooks Shopify partnership is not long for this world, that Shopify is going to subsume all the useful parts of QuickBooks into Shopify, and then use that as a jumping off point to, so like, okay, you're not going to need an ERP until you're $500 million. Right. Because we have like enough in Shopify to make this happen.
Fair. And I think that that's a really interesting point about kind of the definition of commerce and enterprise going forward, and sort of what qualifies, as people seem to be moving down into retrofitting themselves to Shopify versus Shopify moving up to serve all of their needs. I mean, talk a little bit about that, about like who their ICP is or who the user of Shopify is, because they talk about composable and they talk about, Harley threw out a bunch of these words about who Shopify is, I think, in trying to be like kind of one to all, which is really hard to do, but kind of at some level what they're doing.
Yeah, look, Shopify's ICP is everyone. I mean, that's the freaking reality. I mean, it's kind of scary.
I was surprised to hear you say that.
I mean, who isn't Shopify's ICP these days? I mean, I would struggle to think of a company that they're not trying to chase. It doesn't mean like they're the best fit for everyone, but they're chasing them right now. And I think that's kind of where their enterprise pipeline is. You heard an interesting discussion on the call and like, what's your progress at enterprise? And the answers were kind of mixed. And so, when a company starts talking about the pipeline and how long it takes to implement, that it's not like a clean win. You know what I mean? And so there's some like rough edges here. Like it takes 6 to 12 months. Like you're teaching these financial analysts about enterprise commerce on the call to kind of like give yourself time to put some wins on the board.
Right. But before they ask
again next year.
Exactly. Or next quarter, right?
Quarter.
And then at the same time, there was a reference to the ability to do something in 3 weeks, I think, with Shop App. So
yeah.
So I think they're trying to find their way. But I guess, talking about Shopify and talking about their ICP and who they're speaking to, the marketing piece was something I found interesting on the call. Not something we often talk about, but who they're speaking to, how they're positioning themselves. Do they really even need marketing right now? And so it's an investment they're making, and they talked about it. So just talk a bit about that before we start heading towards a wrap.
Yeah, Shopify marketing. I mean, this definitely seems like they're still investing in marketing. They don't do a lot of brand marketing because, frankly, they don't need to.
Right.
Everyone already knows who Shopify is. They're in all the rooms. They talked about brand and kind of performance marketing, and part of the reasons that their OpEx or operating expenses came in slightly better than expected, it was because they pulled back on some performance marketing. Seems like they're investing in I don't know if you've seen, like, Shopify is like increasing their podcast advertising, just from like me as the average listener. I think I've seen Shopify more on YouTube in the last 6 months than I have ever before. And
Yeah, I get it.
so I think Shopify is expanding their use of marketing and found some channels that are effective for them that are relatively low CPA. And they're just going to keep pushing those.
Got it. So, I mean, let's start to talk about future. What do you think the market should be looking for?
Yeah, look, I think the market. So Shopify so far in the last couple of years, they have come off a huge pivot, let's say 18 to 24 months ago, where they shed the logistics business. And that has proven to be, essentially a brilliant move to recover from a boneheaded idea that they were going to be a
Crazy.
logistics company. It's the dumbest thing I ever saw. And good on them. They realize it. Many people don't. And so
Totally.
I heard an interesting comment from Toby on a podcast recently. It was an investor podcast where he said, we caught ZERP fever for about a year. That's how long the whiplash was within Shopify, and then it kind of went away. So we're kind of now annualizing, like Jeff Haasmeister, the new CFO coming on, getting rid of their old CTO, and focusing on their quote unquote core main quest, right? And so the results of that are really nothing short of spectacular. From their growth numbers. So not many companies growing 25% GMV and revenue at 7% operating expense growth, and doubling operating income. So all those things are positive. How this happens long term is, I think you're going to continue to look for enterprise penetration. I think they will continue to make progress. I think it will continue to be slow, because enterprises, not only do you have 6 to 12 month sales cycles and 6 to 12 month implementation cycles, enterprises are on contracts.
Yeah.
And so all the incumbents have, at least 12 months, if not 3, sometimes 5-year contracts for commerce platforms, for PIMs, for OMSs, for payment services. All these things are like a complex, like Rubik's Cube that Shopify needs to solve to get enterprise adoption. And it just takes a while. And like, to me, the market is going to need to like come to grips with that, because I don't think Shopify is backing away from enterprise, and they seem to have the patience there. And so I think the wins will just continue to trickle out.
Yeah.
And they have a solid team in place there, and I think they're doing the right things. And so in some cases, the product needs to catch up. In some cases, their partner ecosystem and app ecosystem needs to catch up. In some cases, their go-to-market motion needs to catch up, like how they message. Like if Adyen is in an account, it's like it's a fucking clusterfuck as far as I'm concerned.
Got it. So, I mean, gosh, so much. I'm like a teenager who grows like 12 inches in 1 year and wakes up and has to figure out how to use its body. I'd sort of say Shopify is kind of there, and they could turn into a Hall of Famer or they could flame out, but I'm going to bet more on the Hall of Famer. So the last thing I would say is, last question rather, you said focus, right? And if Shopify does that, I mean, are they basically like in a race with themselves? Like, is there any longer competition? The same way, I mean, there's no RFP at this point that goes on without Shopify in it, but like,
Yeah.
how does it, do they have competition, and is it a race against themselves?
Look, usually when a company has this kind of momentum, it's very hard to stop, or an outside force to stop. Competitors are usually forced to niche down, and pick a lane to stop kind of the juggernaut type effect. That seems to be what's going on at Shopify. So ultimately, how companies screw up is they get distracted. Like let's compete with Amazon, or let's do something that's sort of outside of our. So they like shoot themselves in the foot, and then realize that's not going to happen. So I think that's a challenge. I think AI is a risk like that. I think it is conceivable that an AI startup could come from zero and challenge Shopify in the SMB space, because, like it or not, Shopify has legacy now. It has old code. It's been around for 20 years. Hopefully they've refactored all of Toby's old code out of the all the code base from 20
The
years
engineer
ago.
in you speaking.
Exactly, right? And so if you're a startup starting from zero with a team of like 5 super smart AI engineers, you could probably build half of what Shopify has done in a year.
Got it. So
Might be overstating.
I think a little bit, but again, I think it's I think to end this, listen, thank you. It's been a pleasure being on this side. Natural selection is real, right? I don't see it happening in the near future, but there will be disruption. It's a question of what it is. But for right now, I'd say based on everything you just told us, you feel pretty good about where Shopify sits, what they just accomplished, what they have at their disposal with the free cash flow they talked about, what they can do, and where they're heading. That's pretty darn good.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, there are a few red flags to talk about. I think the only thing that would put Shopify on like a turbocharger would be if they could figure out a way to expand gross margins. The CFO has been very cautious and I think, in my view, smart, saying that gross margins are not going to expand. They're actually going to slightly erode over time because Shop Pay penetration may not keep pace with overall Shopify payments, and enterprise contracts erode our margin some, et cetera, et cetera. And especially in international markets where we don't have Shop Pay penetration, all those things. If they could figure out a way to like get marketplace type take rates, like move from 3% take rate, which is where Shopify is at, to anywhere doubling their take rate to 6%. Keep in mind that Amazon is at 50%. There's a lot of headroom there. And of course, it would take them a long time to realize that. But I'm interested in the Shop app roadmap as the lowest hanging fruit to make that happen.
And I think it's going to be a really interesting story to see unfold. Hopefully, the next time Shopify announces earnings 3 months from now, I'm sitting here again with you talking about it. But I'm kind of curious to see what happens. And I think they're on a really good path. I mean, I was really impressed, and I know you were too. So
yeah, Shopify is super impressive, and yeah, hopefully we helped you guys unpack what Shopify just did in earnings here.
Oh, totally. You did a great job as always. Thank you, my friend. All right, everybody. Well, that was Rick Watson giving you his take on the Shopify Q3 2024 earnings. And we will be back next time Shopify announces. Until then, be good.
And watch out for more earnings reports from RMW Commerce.
For sure.